Okay, thank you. And so I am now going to share my screen, but before I do so, I just want to point out that Mr. Brian Ferroni is on the line today, and Brian has generously agreed to be our host for any tech or other difficulties that may come up in today's presentation. So should you have any issues or concerns, please feel free to message Brian. Thank you again, Brian. And with that, I am going to go ahead and start today's presentation. So again, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of the Superior Court of California, County of Santa Clara, we sincerely thank you for your interest in learning more about the civil grand jury. My name is Brittany Hillbig, and I have the pleasure of speaking with you this afternoon as the deputy manager who assists the grand jury in their work. So during today's presentation, we're going to focus on the Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury as an independent body that directly serves the County of Santa Clara. We'll then be joined by former and current members of the Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury to share their perspectives on answering the call to serve. And finally, we will discuss the court's active recruitment for the 2023 panel and answer any questions that you may have. There are some Zoom norms here that we ask those of you who are joining for the live presentation to just quickly review. Toward the end of the presentation, we will take questions from today's audience, and we encourage you to unmute and participate at that time. But to kick us off today, we have a very special welcome from our very own Supervisor Otto Lee. And we do have the volume turned all the way up on this video, but please feel free to crank your volume up a little bit if it's hard to hear.
Thank you to the Superior Court of Santa Clara County for including me in this video about civil grand jury. And special thanks to all our residents who volunteer your service on the civil grand jury and those applying to serve. I'm County Supervisor Otto Lee, and I represent District 3 on the County Board of Supervisors in Santa Clara County. District 3 is comprised of Sunnyvale, Milpitas, and the Berryessa and Alviso neighborhoods in North San Jose, with the incorporated hills along our border of Alameda County and all the way out to Stanislaus County as well. Serving on the civil grand jury is truly a unique, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that's also vital to our democracy. Your independent oversight keeps our local government running efficiently and honestly. You serve as the county's civil watchdog agency, with the power to examine all aspects of county and city government, school boards, and other special districts. The integrity of our public officials, public funds, and public services relies on your hard work. With broad access to public officials, employees, and records and information, you are authorized to inspect and audit books, records, and financial expenditures to ensure transparency and accountability of our public funds. And you have the special charge for inquiring into the condition of jails and juvenile detention facilities. At the County of Santa Clara, we have more than 90 agencies and departments, with more than 22,000 employees and a budget of more than $11.5 billion. That's a lot to keep track of, and I'm thankful we have your support. As a volunteer civil grand juror, you are making a major contribution to your community and improving government operations. Serving on civil grand jury is about open-mindedness, to welcome and listen to the views of others. Your ability to work and listen to others and hold a genuine interest in community affairs is so important. Your investigative and writing skills, along with your life experience, will be a key part in fully serving in this important role. Thankfully, our diverse Santa Clara County has so many wonderful citizens that embody these important traits, and thankfully, you are seeking service on our civil grand jury. Again, thank you to Judge Zahner for providing me this opportunity to speak to all of you in support of our civil grand jury, and thanks to all of you who have served, who are currently serving, and those who will be our future members. Thank you.
So as Supervisor Lee mentioned, the civil grand jury is a well-respected investigative body that operates independently from our local county government structure and is part of the California judicial branch. The grand jury system consists of 58 separate grand juries, one in each county, that are convened on an annual basis by the Superior Court. And so on this slide, we briefly highlight the distinct functions of the other two separate types of juries in our county. So trial jurors are randomly summoned by the court to serve for one trial and have 12 members, whereas the criminal grand jury and the civil grand jury both have 19 members. The criminal grand jury is also randomly summoned, and they do specifically focus on criminal cases presented by the Office of the District Attorney. No one is exempt from jury service because of their race, color, religion, sex or gender identity, national orientation, sexual orientation, or economic status. You can learn more about these separate types of juries on the Superior Court website listed here. But as I mentioned, we will be focusing on the civil grand jury today. So the Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury has three purposes: to serve as a watchdog over local government, to investigate resident complaints about local public agencies and officials, and occasionally to consider allegations of a public official's corrupt or willful misconduct in office, and when warranted, filing an accusation against that official to remove them from office. The civil grand jury, their major role is the civil watchdog role, and considerable effort is devoted to these watchdog responsibilities. As detectives for democracy, the grand jury may examine all aspects of county and city government and of special districts to ensure that the best interests of Santa Clara County residents are being served. The civil grand jury is not necessarily looking for criminal behavior, but if any is found, the grand jury will coordinate with the county's Office of the District Attorney. In this way and throughout these responsibilities, the civil grand jury acts as a representative of county residents in promoting government accountability. Most grand jury findings and their corresponding recommendations for solutions are contained in reports, which describe the problems encountered while performing these functions and their corresponding recommendations. The grand jury is statutorily required to release at least one report each year. The grand jury exercises its power through these reports and recommendations for change, and final reports on all of these Santa Clara County civil grand jury findings are submitted to the presiding judge of the Santa Clara County Superior Court. You can see here a press release that was distributed by the court for the 2021 reports, which includes a summary of each report released by the 2021 Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury. All reports and the agency responses going back to 2001 are also posted on the court's public website, which is linked here. In Santa Clara County, 19 citizens are recruited and impaneled to form this independent body. The court conducts this recruitment and selection process with the goal of assembling a panel that is representative of all of the county population in all aspects. Once impaneled, the civil grand jury in Santa Clara County will serve for one calendar year. So in our county, that's January to December. All voting is equal, and while a foreperson is appointed by the court, each juror has a single vote, and the civil grand jury functions lawfully only as a body. So while much of the work is done in committees, a majority of the panel must agree on all findings and recommendations contained in the final report. Grand jurors are impaneled for that one-year term, but they can apply to serve and be appointed to a second consecutive term as a holdover juror. Listed here are the penal code requirements for serving on the civil grand jury in California, as well as the requirement to ensure transparency through the filing of a financial disclosure form. It is important to note that there are only 4 disqualifiers to serving on the grand jury, which are also outlined in the penal code listed here. Again, as Supervisor Lee mentioned, beyond those requirements in the Penal Code, the court seeks the most qualified applicants of all backgrounds, reflecting the broad diversity of the population of Santa Clara County, as well as individuals who represent all of the county's geographical areas. While there is no particular background, education, or experience required to serve, we have listed here some helpful attributes to grand jury service. The court, in partnership with the county, also provides several trainings for each new juror to ensure they have the tools they need to meet their constitutional mandate, as well as ongoing support in terms of providing technology assistance, legal counsel through the county office of the district attorney and county counsel's office, and support from Superior Court staff. So what does the grand jury investigate? Very broadly, the grand jury is tasked with ensuring that the government is effectively serving the public. It is not the function of the grand jury to interfere with the discretionary policy-making powers of public officials. However, the grand jury does serve as a watchdog to ensure that local governments are conducting business in the best interest of the residents. So as Supervisor Lee touched on, the grand jury is also charged with inquiring into the condition and management of the public detention facilities within the county and into the willful misconduct of any public officer in the county. The Penal Code outlines all of the major functions, roles, and responsibilities of the grand jury, which also include the sale and transfer of land, which may be returned to the state of California, as well as the need to investigate and report on the need for an increase or decrease in salaries of county elected officials, as well as the needs of county officers, including the creation of offices or the equipment needed to perform their duties. So how does the grand jury investigate? During the course of their term, the grand jury is heavily involved with the agencies and the local governments that they are investigating. This process can and does include inspections, site visits, trainings, interviews with individuals, and significant document review. The civil grand jury may also and often does receive many complaints from the public raising concerns about local government and its officials. These complaints are acknowledged and may be the basis of a grand jury investigation and final report. Anyone may submit a grand jury complaint, and all complaints are kept confidential. Grand jurors may also simply elect to review the operations of an agency of local government within its jurisdiction, unrelated to any particular complaint, so long as the goal is to promote accountability and improve efficiency and effectiveness in our county government. A wide range of agencies have been investigated in the past, and throughout the course of their term, the grand jury can continue to consult with legal counsel provided by the Office of the County Counsel to ensure that they are within their jurisdiction. Past agencies investigated have included the City of Santa Clara, the Gavilan Joint Community College District, and the County IT Department. So it's a pretty wide range of agencies and offices in this jurisdiction. Notable examples of past grand jury investigations in Santa Clara County have included the accusation issued against the Santa Clara County Sheriff, a multi-jurisdiction report on affordable housing in the region, and the lack of female identifying firefighters in Santa Clara County. These are just a few of the reports investigated by, the reports that led from an investigation completed by the civil grand jury. But as mentioned earlier, there are also responses from each agency who have been investigated, and those responses outline the changes that have been made within that office or agency based on the grand jury's recommendations. There's also significant media attention given to these reports and responses, as you can see on this slide, with just a sampling of some of the recent coverage of grand jury reports in our county. Also recently, the statewide California Grand Jurors Association, which is a nonprofit that is not affiliated with the Santa Clara County Superior Court, honored a Santa Clara County civil grand jury report with its annual statewide Best Grand Jury Report Award. The honor went to the 2018-2019 Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury's inquiry into the governance of the Valley Transportation Authority. Released in 2019, this 61-page report produced by the Santa Clara County Civil Grand Jury recommended a wholesale reexamination of the Valley Transportation Authority's governance structure. At this time, I am pleased to turn the presentation over to our panelists. With us today, we have Nancy Baumann, Karen Delaney, Karen Enzensperger, Farah Hasnat, and David Mariani. If each panelist would like to go ahead and unmute themselves while I stop sharing my screen and start to spotlight our panelists today, that would be great. And so I think I am missing Karen Enzensperger, so please just bear with me for a second here. There we go. Okay. So this afternoon, we do, like I mentioned in the beginning, have some questions for all of our wonderful panelists, but I'd like to go ahead and start with Nancy and ask that you please tell us a little bit about your background. How did it prepare you for service on the grand jury?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really glad you joined us. We want to kind of give you a good idea about what the civil grand jury is all about. My background is in higher education, administration, and program management, although I ran 3 businesses in the academy, one of which was a startup. So it's sort of a hybrid higher ed business background and some other things I've done in the past as well. I think what my background brought that really is applicable to the grand jury work that we've done is the collegiality that we employ. We respect one another, we listen to one another. I think that there have been many times, I'll speak for myself, that I had a certain way that I was thinking, and because of the discussion that we had or another person's opinion, I kind of went in a different direction, or I felt more enlightened about the topic at hand. Listening is a really important skill. Listen carefully, not only to your colleagues on the jury, but also the witnesses that you may bring in to talk with. I'm also curious. That's a personal quality. I'm not sure I brought that from my professional background, but I think that's really important too, because searching for the truth and being as objective as possible is the most important thing we can do. So I think that's what I brought to the table.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And David, can we ask you to also share with us a bit about your background and how it prepared you to join the grand jury?
Yeah, most people call me Farmer Dave. Our family was in agribusiness when I grew up, and I was very active in the family business for many years. Migrated from that to real estate development, and served as a chairman of a bank for about 15 years. So kind of a wide variety of experiences, but the commonality between all of them is, managing people and what starts with being a good listener. And I think that's one of that background is what really helped me in the grand jury experience, because as Nancy alluded to, listening to the other folks from a very wide field of experiences always puts to me, it was a very different spin on a particular subject that we're dealing with. And so, I, like Nancy, changed my mind multiple times because of the diversity that's on this panel. They all have a little bit different slant on something that's really interesting to me. So I found the experience to be more stimulating and fascinating than laborious and drudging experience of digging through things, because it's been working together with folks that I would have never worked with before because of the diversity of the backgrounds on the panel has really made it an interesting experience for me this year.
Wonderful, thank you. Farah, can I ask, is there anything that you would add to either what Nancy or David have shared, or anything that you feel is required to prepare for service on the grand jury?
I think Nancy and David did a wonderful job. The only thing I can add is just come with an open mind and be prepared to work with wonderful, wonderful people. And the 9 months that I've been here on the civil grand jury has been extraordinary and wonderful. And I've met so many wonderful people, not just my core group of grand jurors, but you know, we've had talks from various dignitaries in Santa Clara County, and you know, we've had one-on-one discussions. So it's been a wonderful journey.
Perfect, thank you. How about you, Karen Delaney? Is there anything that you feel is required to prepare for service for someone considering applying for the civil grand jury here in Santa Clara County?
Yeah, I don't think anything is specifically required, but I would like to elaborate on what Supervisor Lee actually said in his presentation about life experiences being so important to jurors. The life experiences, just like any interaction that that you have had with government, can just easily add to your understanding of some of the pitfalls that programs, services, and leadership have in our county government. You know, for example, I was a stay-at-home mother with 3 kids for 20 some years, and but I became very involved in the public schools. And because of that involvement with the public schools those elected school boards, I brought some familiarity and those life experiences as a juror. And the 2 terms that I served on the county grand jury, both of them had issued reports. Wound up issuing reports on school boards, one on San Jose Unified and one on Gavilan Community College. So this isn't to say that a juror who has, for example, always rented cannot add value to an investigation about the county assessor's office. You know, similarly, Brittany mentioned the VTA report. If you've never been on a VTA bus, it's not that you don't add anything to that investigation, but a juror should be aware that they should bring empathy for the circumstances other residents find themselves in, and also I think a real patience for a learning curve, sometimes a very steep learning curve when investigations get started.
Great, thanks, Karen. And Karen Enzensperger, I would like to turn that question over to you as well, but I'm wondering if you might be willing to entertain another question that came in via a direct chat. And that's if you have any recommendations or thoughts for someone with maybe less work experience, someone who's a little younger or might identify as being early 30s.
Well, I think it would be very interesting to have somebody in their early 30s or younger. The hours that we're working are usually regular business hours, which may make it a little prohibitive for a younger person to be on. And when I say younger, that's 30 to me. As far as requirements go and meeting requirements, if you've applied for the position and you've interviewed and you've been selected, you've met the requirements. So it's really a matter of tips and tricks. And this would apply to somebody who is 30 or somebody who is 70. Come in with an open mind, like my colleagues have said. Be ready to be very flexible. Nothing happens without a lot of agreement, but a lot of things happen fast. So we're constantly moving, adjusting, and meeting whatever needs come up. The really particularly interesting thing for somebody who would be in their 30s or even in their 20s is a perspective that at least I just don't have right now. I see it through my daughter. She has a different approach to life and a lot of different resources that I haven't used yet, or may not ever use. I don't know. She just sees life a different way. And I think that perspective would be very refreshing for our group. That said, our group is pretty dynamic, and it has been one of the hugest learning curves that I've had. It would be good to start reading your newspapers online and checking out what's happening if you aren't already doing that, because when you get on the jury, you're going to be looking at everything that's happening and trying to bring perspective to what you're looking at. So I think that covers everything.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And so before we kind of move the conversation away from background and preparing for service, is there anything any of the panelists would like to add?
Well, I have a bee story.
Please.
You know, I think in looking at how a honeybee or a hive works relative to the grand jury, there's something analogous in that there's at least a half a dozen very, very distinct functions in a beehive that if any one of those bees fail to do their particular job, the hive fails. And one of the things that is important in the grand jury is that we need to have a huge diversity of thought and perspective and life experience in order for us to do our job. And you know, and working together, because we all have to be rowing the boat in the same direction. And in order to do that, you have to be absolutely prepared to park your ego at the door when you go into the grand jury, and humbly listen to what everyone else has to say. And what you're going to get out of that is a life experience, an enriching experience that's nothing like it in the world. I mean, it's been really, that's what's made it so enjoyable for me this year.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And please keep the bee references going and never buzz off. But I do want to turn just a little bit, because we received a few questions from the individuals who registered for this discussion about how vacations, time off, and scheduling has worked. And so I'd like to ask Farah, do you have any thoughts or any perspective that you can share on how that's worked on the 2022 grand jury?
Vacations and time off are highly encouraged, because like any job, everybody needs to take some time off to, you know, recharge, you know, feel, you know, go somewhere where you can relax and, you know, just come back and with a you know, refreshed and with an open mind. So, you know, I think almost all of us have taken vacations. Just one thing I need to add is that some of us belong in groups which work more in the beginning of the year, and some of us are in groups which have more work towards the end of the year. So it's better to take a vacation, and, you know, if you're, you know, appropriately. So if you're going to be in a group which has a lot of work towards the end of the year, it's better to take it, you know, in the beginning. But definitely vacations and time offs are encouraged. And I just came back from a 1-week break, so I'm happy to be back.
Thank you. And we are happy as a group to be able to celebrate. Farah had a very exciting ceremony to attend for her daughter. I hope you don't mind me sharing, but we're all just so happy to see her able to take that time and celebrate as a proud mom that she is.
Thank you.
And Karen Enzensperger, I know, and I hope you also don't mind me sharing, that you serve in a leadership role for the 2022 panel as the foreperson pro tempore. Can you share with us from your perspective about how scheduling and time off has worked?
From my perspective, it's been very easy to take time off. I'm trying to think of the right word here. Early on in April, I had a family member who was ill, and I took time to take care of him. And everybody just pulled around and took care of things, and I just stepped right back into where I needed to be. There have been regular vacations. I've taken small ones, but that's because that's what I personally had planned. We all can cover. We know what's happening. We work in groups. None of us works alone. So if you think of it from that standpoint, when one person is gone, it may create a hole, but we fill it as well as we can, and things keep moving along. So it's been relatively easy to step out and step back in from my perspective.
Great. And David, I feel like this is the perfect opening for a B reference, but in all seriousness, do you have any perspective that you'd like to share on taking time off? And then also as part of that, we got a question in the chat I'm hoping that you'll be able to address. And that's, is most of the work online or is a lot in person?
Most of the work has actually been online this year. At the beginning of the year, I had my doubts and reservations how that's actually going to work, and are you going to have the same chemistry if you're not, in the jury suite working together. It actually worked out pretty well, and driving downtown San Jose and back, and the time necessary to do that could be better spent reading up on something that we need to read up on or study or investigate. So I think it actually has worked very well. What was your other question?
No problem. Just if you have any thoughts or perspectives to share on how scheduling and or time off has worked as a grand jury.
Yeah, I've taken some time off throughout the year, and it's I guess what has surprised me the most is I kind of missed my time with the panel. I was looking forward to getting back. I think that as Karen had, or I think Farah had said, that by working with teams, not the platform teams, but working together as groups, everyone covers for each other. So it's been easy.
Great. And so before we kind of move away from this conversation about timing, I want to address, I see Mr. Duncan asked a question in the chat about the 2023 January trainings. At this point, we do know that the regional trainings will be provided entirely online, and the court will provide a license for each juror to log in remotely. So it won't be a software you have to purchase or anything of that nature. But in terms of the court's orientation and the legal training, we more than likely will have a hybrid option, so folks can choose one way or the other. But much of that is, it will change and adjust based on the COVID-19 pandemic and that ongoing nature of needing to balance, what's best for the panel while ensuring the health and safety of everyone who serves. So we can't give a kind of definite yes or no, but remote will certainly be an option, if not the only option for the trainings. Okay, and so I wanted to kind of shift a little bit. We also got another question from Mr. Duncan that I think lends itself really nicely to switching gears a little bit And so Karen Delaney, I'm wondering, can you answer how you navigate investigations from both a legal and practical standpoint?
Sure. Well, sort of the life cycle of an investigation starts off with a topic that has been presented to the jury either externally from a county resident or internally. And again, I just want to harken back to the life experiences that jurors bring. And based on those life experiences, they can have some really good ideas for investigations. There is a threshold question with these topics. You need a supermajority, 12 jurors, to agree to pursue a subject. And these investigations are generally done in committees. I think the committee structure has been mentioned before. I imagine in a beehive, there must be something analogous to a committee, but I don't know what that is. But the grand jury really depends upon its investigative committees. The foreperson, the queen bee, if you will, and the committee chairs should be keeping every busy bee working on something that they're really interested in. So there are multiple investigations going on. And so hopefully every juror can find something interesting to do. To flesh out these investigations, there are interviews. And I was on a grand jury, I started off on a grand jury pre-COVID. So those were done in person, often on site at the government agency offices of others, but sometimes in the grand jury suite that that is provided to the grand jury. So after the pandemic restrictions, most of those were moved to being virtual. There is training from the State Grand Jury Association on interviewing techniques. Obviously, you know, those change from depending on whether you're in person or doing virtual. One of the other panelists mentioned basically a buddy system, a rule of two at least for conducting interviews. There's a lot of emphasis put on admonishments. Those are to keep investigations confidential. It used to be pre-pandemic that a lot of the a lot of the investigation was done by attending government body meetings of school boards, of different agency boards. Those now are almost all streaming, sometimes recorded, so that there isn't nearly as much of that type of on-site work going on. And then there is research, a lot of research. The vast government that we have, because of the public records laws, a lot of it's on computer. So, and what agencies don't release publicly, the grand jury can get by document requests. Sometimes if an agency is not cooperating, county council provides assistance to the grand jury for getting those documents. I'm sorry, there are no FBI style so-called raids going on with the grand jury, but there are some requests that have to be taken to a next level. And then finally, I'd like to talk about sort of towards the end of an investigation, the drafting of the report. Writing up an investigation's facts, findings, and then the recommendations, so that the entire jury, not just the jurors who participated in that particular investigation, but the entire jury can deliberate on whether it wants the public to see its work in that investigation, whether it wants the report published. This is the only way that the jury speaks to the public. And so I cannot emphasize enough how vital it is to have at least one juror, if not 2 or 3 on an investigation team to write. This helps to shine the light on the piece of government in this county for its residents that the grand jury investigated, and hold those responsible for that piece accountable for improvement. So writers are very important, especially at that very last stage of an investigation.
Thank you, Karen. Nancy, I'm wondering if there's anything that you might have that you wanted to highlight or touch on about navigating investigations, sort of how the grand jury goes about that, how your perspective on how grand jurors kind of dive into this in a hands-on, real-world basis.
I really liked Karen's description of the life cycle. I think that was really apropos to the work that we do. There is training. Let me back up one step. So there's the civil code, the elections code, the education code, the penal code, and there's no way we can read all of those in the time that we've been given. But early on in your term, we get legal training by county council and the DA, and also a really helpful training from the California Grand Jury Association that, as Brittany talked about, is a 501c3, not associated with the Superior Court, but of past jury members, civil grand jury members across the state in the 58 counties. So it's another really rich background, and that really helped us. I think I found it very helpful, and they talk about how to do an investigation and a lot of the legal requirements and a lot of relevant legal codes that are, relative to whatever you're doing. So that training is very good. You also have resources like county counsel's office, the DA's office, and we have our great Brittany that you're already exposed to, who is really helpful to just guide us when we have questions, and we do. Sometimes if a witness isn't forthcoming, we have to go to another level, and they really help facilitate that. The other thing I'd like to talk about, we get complaints, we start doing research into whatever that is about, and the entity, the department or agency or school district or whatever. And we're learning. It's a deep dive. If you like to learn, this is the place to be, I think, because you'll learn so much. But another kind of analogy I'd like to bring in, other than the bees, David. I look at it kind of like an onion. And I can talk about, in very general terms, one investigation we were involved in that we thought, based upon a complaint we received, this is pretty clean. And they're handling this, and they're addressing the issues that were brought up in the complaint. And it took basically about 2 interviews with county agencies or individuals to find out that it was a much deeper issue, and is a deep issue. I feel like it's peeling the layers of an onion away. That's kind of how my own personal analogy is. You start out with this, onion, and with every interview, there's always something that comes up that, we need to look into that further. So that's one thing I would add.
Thanks, Nancy. I'll call you Queen Bee just for that comment alone. So before we kind of open it up to comments from all of our panelists about any closing thoughts or things that they would like to share, and then we'll turn it over, of course, to audience questions. I'm wondering if either maybe Farah or David can address a question that came in the chat, and that was, what happens if a complaint is investigated and found to have no merit? Is a formal report still submitted? David,
David.
yeah.
We inform.
Oh, David, I think you accidentally muted.
Okay. The simple answer is we don't produce a report if we think the complaint has no merit. Sometimes we'll look at the complaint on its surface and can make a determination whether this is something that's within our jurisdiction or is something that we want to take on as a group. And so if that happens, the foreperson authors a notification back to the complainant that we're not taking up the complaint. But it's beyond that.
You're muted again.
But beyond that, there's no report.
I just want to add here that we as a grand jury, we vote to not pursue the investigation. So there has to be a majority of us voting to approve this.
And I'd like to add that it is entirely possible that we'll look at an organization and decide that nothing is happening wrong, that things are happening right and deserve to be commendated. And so we cannot submit a report, or we could submit a report that says, hey, you guys really deserve a pat on the back. These things are really good, and keep it up.
Wonderful. And what a positive note to kind of wrap up that discussion on. Thank you, Karen. And so I'm wondering if we can, all of our panelists can take a couple minutes to talk about what you would tell someone who's contemplating applying to serve on the 2023 grand jury. And so if we could start with Karen Delaney, I can just go through the panel that way.
Well, just as with any application for a position, you have to be asking yourself, is this the right fit for you? There are some killer bees that don't belong in the hive. Maybe it's because I live in Los Gatos, but I see a growing extremism here, just like nationally. And I'm amazed at some people's grievances and priors about government from both ends of the political spectrum. And I think that people who don't want to see improvements in government should not be applying for the grand jury. The grand jury is not the place for people who want to tear down our government. Well, you know what? Basically, everybody else outside of the killer bees, the hornets, the wasps, people who do want to make government better, then if this is the right time for you, if you can devote the time and attention that being a juror requires, then please go ahead and apply.
Thank you. And Farah?
Yes, I would like to add that you know, my time at the grand jury has been extremely educational and enlightening. And the amount that I've learned in the 9 months that I've been here, and and I'm sure it's going to increase until December, has been phenomenal. And if you are interested in social issues, if you're interested in improving the quality of life in people in our county, then this is something. And if you have time, because this is a time-consuming endeavor to take, and then this is the right place for you. And another thing which I am taking from my year at the grand jury is the people that I work with. Every single grand juror on this panel has been so kind and so wonderful. And we are a great group of people, and we're very diverse as well. I mean, we come from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of thought processes, and we just come, as Nancy and David both had said earlier, that
sometimes we go into a meeting thinking one way, but when we have a robust discussion, we come out thinking in a different way. And my colleagues, are incredible, and I'm sure every single grand jury is the same. So, yeah, those are the two things that I will take away in my year of being a grand juror: is the education that I've received and the camaraderie that I felt in this group.
Perfect. Thank you, Farah. And David, is there anything you would like to add or something you would tell someone contemplating applying for service?
Well, I think that anyone that's even toying with the idea of volunteering a year of their life to public service is cloth that is cut from a rare bolt of clothing or bolt of linens. And I think it's because of that, it's a very unique group of people. And, I think it comes with it is a sense of giving and a sense of community and a sense of giving back. And we all have that shared sense of moral compass, even though we come from very, very different backgrounds. And I think that's what makes it interesting.
Thank you, Farmer Dave. And Nancy, before I ask if there's anything you'd like to share, I'm wondering if you don't mind taking a question from the chat very quickly. What's the typical size of a group that you work in? 2, 5, 10?
We sort of volunteer for subcommittee work, investigative subcommittees, and we have some other committees just kind of to keep us going on the right track. But the investigation committees are basically, I'm interested in this topic and I'd like to be on it. So I don't think we have one that has just 2 members, but really I think we see from 5 to 8 members. That's what I'm kind of seeing across the investigations we're doing. And that seems to be a pretty good number.
Thanks. And is there anything you would like to add about someone contemplating serving on the grand jury, or anything about your experience or something we've discussed here?
If you're interested in public service, this is an incredible way to put your foot in the door, learn so much about how county, city governments work. It's quite remarkable. I think everyone is very civic minded on our panel. Something that Karen said about the extremism that she sees. I remember at the Grand Jury Association training, someone said, at the end of the year, you shouldn't even know how someone might have voted, that you really need to be very even-keeled and objective. And that's really what we're about. We're a watchdog agency to make the lives of the citizens of Santa Clara County better. And I really believe we all share that.
Thank you, Nancy. And before we again open up and people, feel free to raise your hand, but I am going to ask that Karen also share any thoughts she might have, any kind of last takeaways for someone who's applying to serve, but also Karen Enzensperger, if you wouldn't mind, there is a question in the chat I'm hoping you'll also take.
Sure.
Thanks. So has there been a juror who was not able to work with the group? What happens?
So if there's somebody who can't work with the group, we haven't had anybody that I know of that's left our jury because we couldn't work together. So that's just kind of number one. Number two, I think that it'll kind of work itself out, because there's a lot of conversation between us. We have a lot to share. And like others have said, there's a real openness to other people's ideas. So my guess is if it wasn't working for you, it just wouldn't be a place you wanted to be. But that's a guess, because I haven't experienced that. And for as far as final thoughts go, I'll go back for a second. If there are rubs, or if somebody's not getting along with somebody else, we do everything we can to talk and mitigate that And, you know, just even in the process of writing a report, your emotions can get kind of high. So we take breaks. We walk away for 5 minutes and come back. And everything calms down. I've not ever seen a greater willingness to work with people. And then final thoughts are simply come prepared to work. You'll get more out of this than you put into it, and you'll put a lot into it. And if you've ever thought that you couldn't make a difference, that you couldn't change your government or your community or the people around you, this is the place to go, because you may not make the change that you had in mind, but you're going to make a difference. These are 19 people. We are all in this together. You know, we're in the boat and we're rowing together. And I very definitely see change. I can look back at other grand juries that have made changes. This is, for me, one of the most rewarding parts of it.
Thank you. And Nancy, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have one more just observation. And again, this is my observation, but it's important to understand that the jury, the civil grand jury, is a self-organizing and self-governing panel. And at the beginning, I would say, as you're trying to find out who your colleagues are and trying to get organized around things, it's sort of like there is a manual, a grand jury manual, but really the particular grand jury is self-organizing and self-governing. And I find that fascinating. And it's really been one of the keen observations that I've made, that I kind of look at that in a different way. It's interesting.
Thank you, Nancy, and thank you all for those really powerful remarks. At this time, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but we did promise some Q&A time. So if anyone has a question that hasn't been addressed in the chat, or if you'd like, oh, Mr. Ross, I see you have your hand up. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, it's nice that all 5 of you have had very positive experiences, and in terms of negative features of your experience, there are some obvious ones like time and energy. But what would be some of the negative features of your experiences serving for a year on the grand jury?
Can I take that, Brittany?
Please, yes.
So one thing I'd like to mention that I understand the positive parts of it, but it is also a negative, and it can be a very strong negative for some people, are the recusal rules. So jurors can just be too connected with the subject of an investigation, of a jury investigation, and they need to recuse. Maybe you've heard that in terms of judges, but so it affects grand jurors as well. This means that jurors who, despite having really unique expertise or knowledge of a particular government body, and that would be otherwise beneficial to the jury's deliberations, they must be walled off and not participate in any way. This is to avoid the appearance of conflict or bias. So that is avoiding that appearance is why the recusal rules are in place, and they are important. But as in my experience from my 2 terms, the loss of those jurors, the inability of them to participate in the investigations, to pass down their unique experiences as employees of these agencies in some cases, can be really detrimental to the jury's work.
Thank you, Karen. And Nancy, I see you have your hand up.
I would say one of the negative things is I constantly feel like I'm behind in my reading of audit reports, of documents that we get from an agency or department. my personal reading pile is growing because I don't really have time to get into my own stuff because I could be reading the penal code or something. So the reading is intense at times.
Just some light penal code reading.
Yeah.
Things, right? David, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yeah, the jury is a lot of work. And so if anyone's afraid of work and think it's just something that's nice to put on your resume, you shouldn't sign up, because personally I find that the work so fascinating that it's not work for me. But you have to put the time and effort, and there's a lot of work involved. And so I don't want to sugarcoat the experience without saying that those who don't like to work and like to skate through, that you definitely should not be think about signing up. But I think it's no one ever said that it was going to be wasn't going to be hard, but it's worth it.
And Farah?
For me, time management was difficult, and it still is, because I work part-time outside of the grand jury. And it is difficult. As Nancy said, there's a lot of reading involved. So I have to juggle, both things. But as I said before, my colleagues are very gracious. And if I cannot attend a meeting, if I cannot attend an interview, they're very happy to fill me in. So, but it is tight. It is, it does require at least 20 hours a week.
Thank you all for responding to that question. I'm just going to note that I'm very grateful that since everything is remote, no one was able to say my baking was a negative, because pre-2019, that might have been one of the responses. But Mr. Thompson, I see you had your hand up.
I think Farah just answered my question. So it's a commitment of 20 hours a week?
Sometimes it can be 20 hours, sometimes it can be more.
Okay.
For me, sometimes it's less than 20 hours because, as I said, I work, somewhere else as well. So, it varies. It varies. And and I said before, you're going to be working in a great group of people and who are not going to mind at all that you can't put in 20, 30, 40, 10, whatever hours that you should. But, you go in with an open mind, and you go in knowing that you're going to do your best.
Yeah. Is it a problem if you're gone for 6 weeks?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I need to know.
If I can address that, if you're gone, we have had people that have gone on vacation for a long period of time. When I say long, I'm saying, maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks. My personal feeling is you may not want to be gone longer than that. I mean, nobody's going to tell you can't be, but life is going to move on, and you're going to come back and you'll be behind, and that'll be hard. And also, I wouldn't have wanted to be away longer than that, because what we're doing is really rich in information, and it's very interesting. So to take that kind of a break might just personally feel like too long. That and as far as timing goes, there are real big peaks and real valleys. So one of the committees that I'm on is the continuity committee. We hit it hard at the beginning, and we haven't had a meeting for about a month. And it's just because we're in that phase where we're not going to have to meet too much anymore. We were in the process of writing a couple of reports in the past few weeks, and everybody has a kind of a different role, and they meet the challenge a different way. In my particular place, I was working 7 days a week, sometimes 12 hours a day. And I do work part-time. I own my own business. It has been a juggle. It's not insurmountable. It can definitely be juggled. And this week, I'm probably back down to the 20 hours a week again. It just peaked, and then it calmed down again. That's coming, and you warn the people in your life that I'm going to be busy, but there's an end, and there is.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So I will just also briefly add that the civil grand jury application does include a section that we ask that you disclose times that you may be away. And during the interview with the presiding judge, so our presiding judge is Judge Theodore Zahner at the moment, and next year will be Judge Beth McGowan. So the presiding judge may also ask to discuss that with you. Our presiding judge oversees the work of the grand jury. And so while there is, like all of these wonderful panelists have said, so much camaraderie, respect for each other's schedule, and a ton of discretion in building the grand jury schedule. At the end of the day, if the presiding judge was concerned, there may be a discussion about what may be able to happen. You know, perhaps if you were gone for 6 weeks, but you were able to log in remotely to a meeting such as this, it might be a bit different, but it is on part of that application. So just putting that out there. Do we have, again, I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we have a couple more slides to get through, but I am going to just ask one more time if there are any questions. And then if anyone, okay, so Ms. Kennedy has asked in the chat, are the 20 hours usually scheduled each day? I'm gonna go ahead and say, no, they're not 20 consecutive hours in a day. And maybe I'm reading that question wrong. And so please feel free to unmute if I am. But the 20-hour estimate is normally over the course of a work week. So the court strongly encourages all grand jurors to adhere to the confines of court business hours, which are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., excluding court holidays. And so the court does have several holidays that we observe, and we strongly encourage and celebrate when the grand jury is able to not only take those holidays, but sometimes vote as a body to go dark. You know, say, for example, that the body knew that half of the grand jurors will be taking a summer vacation over the Labor Day week or something of that nature, then we, the court, would certainly celebrate their ability to, and that average would be throughout the year and not including those dark weeks. So I hope that does answer that question. I'm going to go ahead and also ask that we all put our hands together and thank our wonderful panelists for sharing their perspectives and the time that they're taking that goes above and beyond their service on the grand jury, and for Karen Delaney as a former grand juror to come back and lend her time and expertise to our community. It really shows, I think, the strength of these individuals and the service that they've really committed to. So thank you so much again, Karen, Farah, Nancy, and David for doing so. I'm going to very quickly just get through these last slides here, just so that we're sure that everyone also is aware that the deadline to apply for service on the grand jury is this Friday, September the 16th. We can accept if your application is sent by US mail and it's postmarked on the 16th, that is fine. You know, up until 11:59 p.m. if you're submitting it online or by email. But as I mentioned briefly, Presiding Judge Zahner does oversee this process. And so he wanted to make sure that we shared that the court is still seeking applications, that we have that information available online, and that all civic-minded individuals do apply if you're so interested. The application, like I mentioned, is available on the Superior Court website, which is linked here. We are going to email out this PowerPoint and all of the links and information that are included in this slide to everyone who registered for today's presentation. You are welcome to email or call. I monitor that email inbox and I'm happy to chat directly with anyone and everyone who's interested. But aside from that, I'm gonna now stop sharing my screen since I put those two slides out. And again, just thank our panelists. And if anyone is wanting to continue chatting, I know we've used up the hour that you registered for, but we are welcome to take your questions or comments, and or you can go on and enjoy the rest of your evening.